The most important thing you can do in any business, no matter what it is know your customer and talk to your customer and listen to your customer.
Rocket.net has gotten to 5 million ARR in 3.5 years, which is amazing. Like, wow.
So I reached out to Michael from VPN.com and I said, hey man, I need rocket.com. And he laughed. He's like, yeah. He's like, yeah, right, dude.
That's going to be
yeah.
$1 million.
And I'm like, no, find out.
Yeah.
And sure enough, he's like, dude, I won't even be able to get them to answer me for less than 7 figures, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, I'm like, all right, how about rocket.net? That's for sale. And, long story short, I ended up buying rocket.net for $50,000, and I had 10,000 in ARR. So it was probably the biggest bet I've ever made in my career.
Wow.
And it paid off more than any bet I've ever made in my life.
So Ben, it is so nice to have you on the podcast today. We have, virtually known each other for many years, but actually haven't gotten a chance to meet in person. And you are a figure in the web hosting industry going back a really long way that a lot of people will be familiar with. I wondered if we could start by talking a bit about your history, how you got into the industry. And then maybe we can work forward in time to the present and what you see as the opportunity in the space, what you're working on, in the coming years.
Sure.
So can you take us back to the beginning and share what inspired you to enter the web hosting industry and eventually start Host9?
Yeah, absolutely. So, thanks for having me. My name's Ben Gabler. I'm the CEO and founder at rocket.net. I've been in the hosting industry about 22 years now. Got my start in early 2000s. Funny enough, I was delivering pizza at the time, and I spent a lot of time on IRC. It was kind of what I did. I didn't really, I surfed a lot in high school, but other than that, I was excited to get home and kind of jump on IRC and talk to my friends. So when I did that, I met somebody, I think it was Adam Tuttle, and he was based out of Toronto. And I had just got home from work that night and probably made like $50 delivering pizza. And he told me about this awesome business he had. I think it was even like Web Host Wizards or something. And I was like, what is hosting? And, at the time I had purchased my first server ever from fdcservers.net. And it was a free BSD box. Had no idea what I was doing. I basically bought it to run an IRC server. And then when I found out about this hosting thing, I learned about cPanel. So I think it was cPanel version 3 or so back then, maybe 4. And I ended up reloading the box to be Red Hat 7, I think it was at the time, and installed cPanel, and the rest was kind of history. I got to learn from the ground up, really just, server management, working with the command line, working with cPanel and WHM. And, I just kind of did a little hosting company back then, and, probably had I think it was like 60,000 a year in revenue or something like that. And I found that one of the largest hosting companies that was on the up and up was HostGator. And this was in 2006. And I realized they were 30 minutes south of me. So I was like, I got to talk to them. I got to see what they're doing. I need to figure out the tricks. How are they growing so fast? And when I went down there to interview, I actually ended up hitting it off with Brent Oxley very well. And I think at the time I decided, hey, you know what? I'd like to work for HostGator. And, I think I was 20 years old. I was employee number 8. And, I got to really see the early days of HostGator and how we scaled. Back then there was a lot of outsourced support. Many people may not know that, but we used, a company called eTouch Support, I think, out of India. And we were starting to, get to the phase where we didn't need that anymore. So we were starting to hire more locally, and it was really neat to watch the company grow. And eventually Brett moved the company to Houston. I was 21, had a girlfriend, my family, and, I was like, I don't really want to make that move. I'm not ready for that. So I ended up staying back and, I left HostGator and started Host9, grew that to a little under 2 million a year in ARR. It was early 20s, completely bootstrapped, living out in my parents' house, the whole shebang. And then I ended up moving to Houston, not really knowing where HostGator was at the time. Houston's a really big area. Funny enough, ended up in the same neighborhood as some of the HostGator guys. But, I went out there just to kind of try to scale the company a bit, hire some local folks out there. Back then, with cPanel, EV1, and the Planet and Server Matrix, there was a lot of talent in the Houston area. So moved out there and, ended up linking back up with HostGator a couple years later and decided to sell Host9 to HostGator and went on to COO there once we kind of merged that Host9 brand under the small orange section with Site 5. And, about a year in, Brent said he decided he wanted to sell the company. And at that point, I had been, 5 to 6 years on the grind, just going and going and going. And I came back to visit some family in South Florida. I'm like, I accidentally bought a boat when I was visiting my family. And, I'm like, man,
Accidentally.
I just want to be back in Florida. So when I found out the company was, going to sell, I departed HostGator and took a solid year off and fished probably every day of my life and really kind of got a good break in. And yeah, I've just always been super interested in the hosting space. As crazy as it might seem, it's not an easy business. It's not an easy industry.
Mm.
The only person that's on call more than me is probably a heart surgeon, right? So, but I love it. In between that, as we'll discuss a little bit about. I've tried to venture out from hosting and get a break and do some SaaS startups to really learn more about software engineering and development, and then found myself right back in hosting.
Yeah, I mean, tell me about that. What is it about web hosting that is just so engaging and intriguing? What do you love about it?
I think it's the only thing I consider that I've ever been good at. And it's like, everybody, is really good at something, whether you're a football player, a baseball player, or an investor, different things like that. I didn't go, never went to college or anything. So, just kind of, really learned, even as funny as it is, I learned a lot about business while I was working at the pizza delivery place. I learned about, filing taxes, and I learned a very important lesson in business, which is, when you open a business, you should be able to do as much as possible in every certain role, whether it's making pizza or sweeping the floors or washing the dishes. The owner of that business, of that pizza shop, could do everything. So if somebody didn't show up to work, he wasn't sitting there with, unable to do his business. So, with hosting, I've kind of just naturally over the years been able to really stay heavily involved in server management, product development. And, I think for me, it's just been something like it just seems natural to me. Like it's not like it's very challenging. Don't get me wrong. And I'm still learning stuff every day, but it's something that I'm very interested in. So it's never been a job.
Wow, that's amazing. Because a lot of people would look from the outside at web hosting and think, man, that is the most commodified industry. I mean, just you put it. The perception is you load cPanel onto a bunch of servers. You find some data center space. You try and haggle for the cheapest deal and everything. You run a bit of web advertising, and you've got customers. And it's just a customer support operation and a marketing operation. But yet you find it so fascinating.
So
Like from the inside view.
everything you just said is exactly why I find it fascinating. Everything in this
Yeah.
industry is so complacent. This industry was truly built on here's cPanel, go sell it. Right? Here's cPanel, go sell it. So what do you have at the end of the day? Every single company on the planet is selling the same product. And, with Rocket, we're, completely bootstrapped. I own 100% of the company. We've gone from 0 to 5 million in ARR in 3.5 years. And, we don't do any paid media, right? Like our marketing efforts are WordCamp, community-based things around WordPress, different conferences, which traditionally would never work in hosting. But in what we do, it goes a very long way. But more importantly is investing in the product and the platform, right? Like we initially, when I built the company, used a lot of very familiar technologies. Like as a customer, you would never know cPanel is involved behind the scenes because it's just an orchestrator. cPanel is not our product. It's a part of the platform that makes our product. So, unlike all the other companies out there, we built our own product. And what that product is the interface that we have and the API that we have to do all of the things that result in the solution we provide this market. So because of that, we have some of the largest hosting companies in the world reselling our product. I think that's what really sets us aside. Like our CTO, you probably know him, Dave Costin. Him and his brother built cPanel. So one of
Right.
the differences at Rocket.net is we really truly have a SaaS approach, and we build our own platform and product.
A SaaS approach to web hosting. I mean, I guess we've seen that a little bit in the last few years with companies like WP Engine, who built a SaaS business all around WordPress, which is it's technically a hosting company, but they didn't come at it in the typical hosting way. I doubt they ever had a single cPanel machine in their infrastructure. It was kind of from the ground up to support WordPress as an application. And there's other providers who have also come up focusing on WordPress. So you guys have at RocketNet, you have cPanel at the heart of what you do, but you're extending it.
So cPanel is a small fraction of what we do. I mean, you could think of creating an account, right? Like an Nginx config, whatever the web server config, like that. That's where the role that cPanel plays in Rocket.net. And the way that we've built our platform is it's swappable, right? Like we're not vendor agnostic. We can work with any edge provider in the world, Fastly, Cloudflare, Edgio, you name it. We can work on any platform in the world. We procure all of our own bare metal, and then we deploy our own virtualization layer on there. So if we decide that, hey, provider A is not working out anymore, we want to move to provider B, we can live migrate a VM from one location to another, change some IPs and some configs on our edge platform, and traffic immediately swings over. Our customers may see a 2-minute blip. So we've kind of taken all the benefits of public cloud and implemented them in a private cloud, which is a third of the cost, right? So, it's been incredible. And, I think when I say SaaS, it's a little bit different, right? Like, yes, software as a service, the traditional definition, but I think, again, like nobody in our space had Cloudflare Enterprise at the very beginning of their product. Rocket did. And then the rest of them kind of followed suit, right? And we're kind of driving this evolution of hosting, which is really about content delivery at the end of the day. And, WordPress is literally a content management system that outputs HTML, CSS, JS, and images, right? So we created this layer that is, deploying that, to as many eyeballs as possible. And we deliver like a 98% cache hit ratio. So our origin server is literally just managing WordPress at that point. So I think, with us, it's kind of in our DNA, right? Like we have all of this hosting experience, but then I have the most intelligent chief CTO ever that has built software his whole life, right? Like if you went back in time and told Dave Costin in 2006 he was going to work for a hosting company, he'd have laughed and said, you're crazy. And if you ask him today, he's not going to tell you he works at a hosting company. He works at Rocket.net, which is a managed WordPress platform. So it's a big difference. And we continue to push the envelope with just, a customer success, like a customer first approach. So like everything we do, whether it's a PTO policy or a feature, every discussion is how does this affect our customer, right? And I think one thing that you also don't see in this space is product management, right? Like I think you see CTOs are typically infrastructure CTOs, right? Whereas ours is software. So I think that's kind of the big thing that I mean here. Like Rocket launched with an API. Some of our competitors doing 50 million a year in revenue just launched an API last year, right? So it's kind of like we've solved a lot of these problems. We're working on some really big stuff right now to help kind of stop the bleed to Shopify for WooCommerce. And it's far more than just deploying these fast Google Cloud CPUs that everybody can go deploy, right? Like we're really putting a lot into the product and doing things. So many people in this industry will tell you the problem is CPU. You need 192 cores and Taylor Swift has to be on our platform. But the reality is the real problem is a software problem that needs to be solved, right? And it usually points at something, whether it's MySQL or some certain bottleneck. Doesn't matter if you have 256 cores, doesn't matter. So, that's what's been so exciting for us. We continue to really invest in our people, in our customers, and the brand. And, a big part of that is staying focused as a SaaS provider, with that SaaS mentality.
So, what I've noticed in the market is hosting companies do tend to segregate into addressing different types of end customers. So there's definitely, what you would call mass market hosting companies that have hundreds of thousands to millions of domains under management, and it's focused on the tiniest SMB customers. And then there are hosting companies that are much more boutique oriented, that have a handful of really large customers they're managing, but providing white glove support to. And then there's other kinds. But where would you place Rocket.net? What kinds of customers are in your sweet spot?
So, everybody in our space would tell you agencies, which is
Mm.
very true here. We have, the best part about working with an agency is you could host 2,000 websites with one point of contact versus 2,000 end users. Lately, we've been, just nationally moving up market. We do a lot of enterprise engagements. We host some of the largest, blogs in the world, like natasha'skitchen.com, wellplated.com. One of the early wins on the platform was Hannity.com. I'm not political, but these are very big websites that have a massive demand for scale. And, it's been incredible to see that, we have, my Florida license is another example. Like we have all of these big, important government entities and just companies of all shapes and sizes leveraging this platform. And that's what's been really incredible is, you know, um, at the end of the day, like we don't take it lightly. We just announced we now have 2 layers of backups. So we have 2 encrypted backups for every single server and every single site, 2 different complete locations. And we understand that people are trusting us with millions and millions of dollars of business and their livelihoods. So we did over 45,000 chats last year and a sub 1 minute response time and a 97% customer satisfaction rate. So it just kind of the data really speaks volumes to how much we truly care about the business. And we are not driven by spreadsheets and targets and things like that, right? Like, yes, we have to maintain profitability. We have a very healthy business running at a 50% EBITDA, but I'm not hammering Chad every day to hit his quota. We don't do outbound emails, like we don't do any of that stuff, right? And we've been very fortunate to continue to focus on this platform and our customers, that it's just driven the word of mouth and influencer growth like crazy.
So let me get that straight. You guys don't do traditional marketing to promote Rocket.net. You're relying on word of mouth and attending events like WordCamp.
I get yelled at by marketing when I say it the wrong way. Because on one podcast they're like, we don't do any marketing. It's like, yes, we do. It's not that we're relying on it, right? Like it's the channel is so big between some of the
Mm.
partnerships we have, some of our resellers, and the word of mouth that I'm not sitting here trying to become a billionaire, right? I want to continue to have fun and create an amazing culture like we have and service the customer as best as we possibly can. So, whether we're growing, 6 figures ARR month over month, or, there is no, we have to hit this. We've gotten to the point where we're profitable. We have an amazing team. Our team's very happy. Our team is compensated very well. I've paid for childbirth. I've paid for moves. I've paid for weddings. I mean, you name it. The company.
Weddings.
Oh, absolutely.
Weddings.
If somebody needs financial help with that on our team, we do whatever we can
Wow.
to help. And, that's what it's really all about. Like every single person at Rocket shows up ready to go the distance for our customers. And that's because we also invest in our people. So, I think, it's not that we rely on it. I've had like our team's coming on site next week to talk through our strategy and what we want to achieve this year. And we do have the playbooks for outbound sales and paid media, retargeting, all that stuff. And if it comes to a point where we need to start implementing some of that, we can. But right now, we're not trying to, every single hosting company I know that has just exploded and grown as fast as they possibly freaking can has never worked out well. The ball on customer service always drops. So, for
Yeah.
us, we added, we grew 150% last year, and we added 5 heads, right? And that's not because we're trying to stay, thin. It's because that's all we needed. We have a lot of tooling and automation in place that, enables our customers to self-serve or our team to just really be extremely efficient. We have 1 minute response times, but I don't care if a chat takes 6 hours. If that's what it takes,
Right.
that's what we do.
You sound a lot like another hosting CEO that I had the pleasure of talking with a lot, back in 2012, 2013. The founder of, well, I guess I'll leave him nameless, but the founder of one of the companies that ended up joining the Endurance International group. And he had a distributed team a very fast growing company, lots and lots of success. But what really distinguished him, in my mind, was his sort of fervent, absolute dedication to the company. He would be the guy at 3 o'clock in the morning answering tickets if that was what was needed, even when he was really big. And I get the sense that that's
Trying to
you as
think if I
well.
know who it is. Company start with an A?
It might,
Yeah, I
it
think I know who
might.
you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah. But we actually worked with this guy in creating our cloud email delivery service. So he was the first customer because he was so keen to solve problems for his customers, and he was willing to try anything to fix email delivery problems that he was having, and gave us a lot of rope to figure that out as a cloud service provider. So yeah, I'm just saying you sound very similar in that kind of fervent dedication. That might not be something you would imagine seeing in the executive suite at one of the large hosting providers, which honestly seem to be run by accountants these days.
it, Absolutely. I mean, even when, in 2013, I was at GoDaddy, I relaunched the entire hosting product line. The first thing I did was, everybody at GoDaddy, no matter what role you're going into, has to go through orientation. So part of that orientation is shadowing some calls. So I went into the hosting support division, and literally the first call, somebody needed a PHP extension. And we don't do that, right? So sell them a VPS. I'm putting them on mute. I'm like, hold on, please hold. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, this is literally a 1 second fix. Like, they just need PHP IMAP. Oh, we can't do that. And then he tries to sell them VPS. I'm like, man, this is a problem. And it occurred to me that the support team was a revenue generator, and that's a problem.
Yes, it
And
is.
it's an unsolvable problem. Like towards the end of GoDaddy, with my 1 year stint, I just couldn't take it anymore. Was they wanted me to take on, hosting support. I said, it's impossible.
Hmm.
There is no way to win that role because it's got to generate revenue, and support, it doesn't generate revenue. It keeps revenue. Right. And, I think the challenge was we had one of the best products on the market, and it was amazing. And we were doing 2,600 cPanel accounts a day, like insane, like way more than HostGator ever saw. And I thought HostGator scale was crazy. And the reality was, as soon as the product really took off and we rounded that corner of becoming like a real hosting company, like I had the opportunity to move a needle at $1 billion company. I was all over it. I'm like, this is
Yeah.
incredible. You guys have never been a hosting company. We're going to be a hosting company. And I remember tweets like, I can't believe I'm saying this, but GoDaddy's hosting is amazing, right? And then what happened is the rest of the business wanted to get in that, right? So like, how many products can we shove down there? Like when I launched cPanel, I put live chat and a help desk. I broke like every rule at GoDaddy inside of cPanel because we had a 6-day delay on tickets. So I knew, and granted, we didn't open it up to the world. This was like call center selling it and 1% of website traffic. I remember I was doing like 70 tickets and chats a day. And I knew that my product would fail if it went through the same support channel. So I ended up, when they realized what I was doing, they're like, well, we can't go back on this, but what we need to do is they called it the bullpen, and they would give me 8 people for 2 weeks.
Huh.
And I would work with 8 people to train them on exactly how to support this product. And we effectively ended up carving out a cPanel support team because I had to explain to GoDaddy, like, this is a way different breed of customer and a way different product, right? Like 6 days, they're already at another hosting company after 3 hours. So
Absolutely.
it was crazy. But those are some of the things that I had to do. And, when you look at it, it was just, there was, a lot of, like upselling and cross-selling and just all the stuff that would take place. But then there was also a lot of like missing knowledge in certain areas to where like some of these things would come in and I would end up continuing to do support. So a big part of the success was I would live in the call center, and all my buddies that were on the internal support team were like, dude, what are you doing here? You're a product manager. Like, go out there. I'm like, no way. I need to figure out why we suck, how we're not going to suck, and what we're going to do better, and what problems we have today. And that's where I was like, cool, we need to enable the IMAP extension on every cPanel box by default, right? Based off of customer interaction. So going back full circle, the most important thing you can do in any business, no matter what it is know your customer and talk to your customer and listen to your customer. So it paid off massively at GoDaddy. It made the product a huge success. And that was something that I continued to do till the end of my time there. And, it just got a little too corporate for me. And that's when I kind of wanted to venture out and do more than just cPanel. And that's when I started to, do a couple little software startups.
Right. I mean, so let's talk about that. EasyRent.com. What was that all about? How did you get started? How did
Yeah.
you get the idea?
So I was living in Phoenix or Scottsdale working for GoDaddy, and I had bought two townhouses in South Florida where I'm originally from. And obviously, number one, I didn't want to pay 8% or 10% to a property management company, but I'm also not going to go back and forth constantly to collect rent or do whatever. So I'm like, couldn't find any system out there outside of like massive enterprise solutions. And I'm like, man, there's a really big need here for this. And, it was super early. I think at its peak, it was processing like $300,000 a month in rent. And then Brent said he had a fallen out with the CEO of help.com, and he had a ton of money invested there, and he really needed me to go take it on. So I kind of stopped the effort on Easy Rent. I wasn't very passionate about it. I learned a lot, but it wasn't really interesting to me. And I think that's super important as a founder and the CEO. Like, you got to be interested in what you're doing. So, somebody else had taken that over, and it had sold off. Nothing crazy. Like, it wasn't a massive thing. It was literally like just kind of somebody else take it over. And I did help.com. And that's where the first thing I did was I brought Dave Costin in. He was at Cloudflare at the time. And I was like, he's the only guy I know that could do what we need to do. And that's effectively, before omni-channel really became a term, is build a true omni-channel solution. And I could tell you right now, if I had been able to launch help.com in its state with Dave, I'd be retired right now. I'd be worth hundreds of millions of dollars, because that problem that we were trying to solve back then still exists today, right? The
And what
challenge.
is that? What is that problem? What is
So,
that problem that still exists?
so there's no real good solution allowing you to do multiple different types of conversations. So like even today, there's a live chat, and there's a very specific experience live chat. Then you have a help desk, right? Very specific solution, like need for a help desk. So what's missing is the true all-in-one solution, where we have to use livechat.com for our chat, and then we have to use Zendesk for our help desk. Zendesk is a
Hmm.
help desk. Yes, they bought Zopum and they tried to merge it in, but it's just they're not live chat, right? Live chat is a great live chat solution, but it's not a help desk. So there really is no all-in-one solution, right? And we were doing crazy stuff at help.com. Like, if you came into chat, we'd look your email address up in Magento and find your order details. We would look it up in WHMCS and find your account details. All just integrations that we did, and that stuff didn't exist back then. So I think um, I think the term I had for it, the phrase I had, was intelligent customer service powered by your data. And that was back in 2016 or something. And that's how we kind of wanted to shape it, is it's enabling you to do this intelligent customer service based on your actual data and your customer. So we, unfortunately it was really challenging for us to launch the product, because, there was some disagreements from the investor on when it was ready. And software is never ready. So, ultimately after a couple of years, I had to move on, and that's when I took the chief product officer role at StackPath.
Yeah, right. Okay, so StackPath. I mean, StackPath, a bit of a legendary company in terms of like who founded it, who was providing funding right at the start, and some legendary hosting industry people were involved. Tell me about StackPath. How did you get brought in there?
Yeah. So Lance, at the time when I was looking to make a change at Help, Lance had reached out to me, and he had, I actually met with Lance at the very beginning before StackPath even had a name. I met him in New York City, and he had told me about the idea of building the security platform. And, we had a great time, but I was still kind of in the middle of Easy Rent, and then at the time help.com. So I didn't want to leave the investor high and dry. And I was just like, Lance, I'd be in yesterday if I could. I just didn't have the ability to do it at the time. Otherwise I would have been on that founding team. But I kept in touch with Lance. They struggled with product, just product development. Product was kind of being ran by marketing at the time, and it was not being ran well. So they were just kind of needed some help in the product department. So Lance is one of my best friends, through the industry. I did a lot of business with Lance over the years with Software. To this day, I miss Software. We work with Phoenix Snap. It is the closest I've been able to come to Software. Phoenix Snap does a hell of a job, but really kind of took for granted what software really enabled back in the day. And it was awesome. I got to work with the team that built that platform, at StackPath, which was great. And, we built some products and, consolidated some brands. And, I learned a lot. One of the last things I did is we went on the road and raised 180 million. Never done that before. Right. So that was a neat
Wow.
learning experience. But, ultimately one of the brands we bought was Max CDN. And we had like a
All right.
90% churn rate because WordPress users could not figure out how to use the CDN as a outside of just asset delivery, which still creates a problem for the initial request. So I kind of pitched it to the board. I was like, hey, like there's this huge opportunity. We can go out. We have the largest affiliates in WordPress today. Like we can go out with a product built just for this. I was talking to, like even Kinsta at the time, they were still trying to, get their market share. And their co-founder, Brian Jackson, left and, the conversation fell off. But board was like, yeah, that's cute. Like we'd rather go chase Disney, right? Which funny enough, Rocket's platform hosts some Disney sites today, but, they weren't interested. So I said, hey, like I'm out, and, I decided to go out and build what would become Rocket. And, I bought onrocket.com for like $3,500 on Brand Bucket. And, I got to about 10,000 in ARR and I sponsored the Palm Beach Tech Association. And when I saw our logo and it said Rocket, I'm like, man, nobody's ever going to find us. So I reached out to Michael from VPN.com and I said, hey man, I need rocket.com. And he laughed. He's like, yeah. He's like, yeah, right, dude.
That's going to be
Yeah.
$1
And I'm
million.
like, no, I'll find out.
Yeah.
And sure enough, he's like, dude, I won't even be able to get them to answer me for less than 7 figures, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, I'm like, all right, how about rocket.net? That's for sale. And, long story short, I ended up buying rocket.net for 50,000. And I had 10,000 in ARR. So it was probably the biggest bet I've ever made in my career.
Wow.
And it paid off more than any bet I've ever made in my life. We have
Serious?
built
You think the domain?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Do I think Rocket would have been successful without it? Yeah. But I think at the end of the day, there is so much value to investing in a domain name. I can't even imagine being rocket.com. Rocket.net just fits so well with what we're doing. And granted, I'm biased. It's burned into my brain. I wear a rocket.net t-shirt every day of my life, right? I got Rocket, cups, like I'm just obsessed. But which funny enough, actually, as we're on this call, this is my mouse pad, the Host 9 logo. But I think it was the best decision I've ever made in my life because we've been able to really brand it so well. And there's a lot of benefits to having a domain name as your brand, right? So like anytime somebody recommends us on Facebook, it's an immediate link to our website. Nobody has to go look for us. We're like, oh, who's rocket.net? They click on it. So, I think it's been an incredible part of the journey, and it was definitely a huge bet, but I wouldn't change it for the world.
Isn't that something? Yeah, I mean, back when I was trying to think of a name for mail channels, back in the day when the company started, nobody knows this, but we were actually working on disposable email addresses. My friend had this cool idea where you could make disposable email addresses out of subdomains. So you would have like your username part at some random characters .yourdomain.com. The idea being that instead of using a disposable email address service, you would just have a thing that can manipulate the DNS and create subdomains. And there's a cool side effect of that in that when you disable a disposable address, you're actually shutting off the DNS record. And so it's not even resolvable. Nobody can even find your mail server at that point. So I thought that was really cool. But anyway, we were trying to figure out a name for that concept. And I must have looked for 2 days at hundreds and hundreds of potential names and domains, and mail channels happened to be available back in 2003. And so that's what we settled on. And it's cool how that one name has, two aspects to it. One is that it is memorable and it's easy to type into a browser if someone mentions it to you. And two, the concept of mail channels can be applied to many different things relating to mail, right? It's just channels, whatever that means. And so we switched from, disposable email addresses, which just we couldn't make pay back in 2004, 2005, over to outbound mail delivery as a service, where obviously it makes a lot of sense, the concept of having channels of mail.
Sure. No,
So
and
similarly, Rocket.net is an amazing concept. It's just a single, what, 5 letters word, that is so easy to tell other people about and have them just type it into their browser.
yeah, I mean, and to touch on mail channels, look, I've been in the industry a very long time, and we were moving a very large agency customer over. I think they had like 100 websites. And one of the things they really needed was the transactional emails, but not a lot, like password resets and with our platform, we can move a site from one part of the world to another in real time. And that means the IP can change behind the scenes. Doesn't affect delivery because of Cloudflare, but that would affect SPF records, as you can imagine. So
Mm.
we didn't really have a good solution. And we also don't want to be in the email game at all. It's a pain. So I started kind of looking around at what others were doing to solve this. And I ended up reverse engineering a couple different solutions. And I was testing, can't remember the name of it, but I was testing another pretty big provider. I think Cloudways uses them. And then I was testing mail channels. And within 4 hours, I was able to actually create a white label domain with wildcard records that covered, the SPF for mail channels and, the way that we creatively create unique email addresses on the fly for each website. But I was able to have XM recognize that domain. And if it matches my WP emails, then we're going to send it off the mail channels. Right.
Hmm.
So I was able to knock that out in like 4 hours, which is incredible. And I had to do a lot of custom stuff. Like there was a couple of examples out there for getting XM to play nice with it, but not in the exact way that I needed to do it. So I was able to get it working. And for us, it was just now we literally override the send mail path in PHP INI for anybody that needs to use it. And anytime it's my WP emails in the email address, it knows to use mail channels. Right. So we've been incredibly happy with it. It's solved a very big pain point that we had. But the next step for us is we're going to allow vanity domains. So that way a customer of ours can say, hey, I'm an e-commerce shop, especially with this WooCommerce product we're working on. I need my emails to be lobsteranywhere.com, right? So we're going to start, that's kind of our next phase. But over the last probably year and a half, I want to say that we've been working with mail channels. It's been a great experience. And, it truly is a unique solution to the point where I was asked the other day by Dolly and they're like, who do you use for email? I'm like, oh, you got to use mail channels. I'll do an intro. Right. And it's a very simple solution, but obviously complex problem to solve.
I appreciate the flattery. I think if you want to win at any business, what you have to do is you have to obsessively solve a problem for one particular kind of customer and not stop doing that forever. And so whatever that kind of customer needs, you address that particular problem, no matter how hard it is. And if you do that, eventually you're the only one doing it. And there's nobody else who can do that, right? And I remember when we engaged with one particular large customer, they were having all kinds of problems delivering through one of the other transactional mail services that isn't really designed for hosting. And they got their IPs blocked by one of the big block lists. And the provider said, hey, you got to do some spam filtering here. That's why you're getting blocked. And they were like, well, what? You mean we don't know anything about spam filtering? And so they somehow found us. And in conversation early on, I remember their chief technical officer said, you guys are like, you're the only ones for this, aren't you? Like you're the guys. Kind of like we've got this other problem that we have to solve, and there's like one vendor that does that for us, and you guys are the guys for this particular problem within a problem within a problem. And I'm like, yeah, pretty much.
Yep.
Yeah. But that the challenge for us is there's a lot of noise in the email space. There's a lot of different providers,
especially right now, right?
Right? They send transactional mail. How many? There's dozens and dozens of companies that send transactional mail, but their use case is absolutely not what hosting providers need, where you have a shifting matrix of of customers sending all kinds of random stuff all day long, and where abuse is actually the primary issue.
Absolutely.
If you're, if you're just looking for an individual account to send, mail out to your mailing list, we're not that, don't come to mail channels. But if you're a provider and you have thousands of customers of your own who have thousands of their own users that you can't really control, that's our sweet spot. you
Definitely.
know,
No,
yeah.
it's literally a one-click integration for us and it's not the best solution in the world for our customers because again, it's using on behalf of, and it's way better than any PHP mail solution, but it's still not something that we're like, oh, don't worry about email, it's solved. Like not at all. We're like, hey, this is like a stopgap for critical emails, but you're gonna want to implement your own SMTP plugin or something like that. But again, this hopefully by Q2 we'll have the full integration with mail channels to where customers can bring their own domain.
Yeah, and we're working pretty hard on that at the moment. One of the things that has changed this year is Google announced that starting in February, they were going to really crack down on bad email practices. So they're requiring anyone who sends from their domain to more than 5,000 recipients per month on Gmail, that they have a good DMARC policy in place, that they DKIM sign all of their messages. And like this has really ramped things up, especially for smaller customers within hosting who probably do meet that threshold of sending, but they don't know what DKIM is, right? And so we've been getting a lot of requests to solve that problem. We're going to do something about that inside of
Have
mail
you ever met
channels.
Nick Nelson before?
Absolutely,
So
absolutely.
my, I just moved recently and I have, I'm in this residential commercial, location. So I have a 1,200 square foot office here and I've got a big conference room. So Nick was actually here yesterday. He lives like 20 minutes from me now, right here in South Florida. And he's working on a startup that he's launching called Mail Mechanic. So it might be interesting for you guys to kind of link up because he's heavily focusing on DMARC. I mean, he showed me a lot of stuff yesterday and helped me get our DMARC and everything all set up. But it's something that we're actually going to start offering to our customers, just as like, here's a service we recommend because, I've known Nick forever. And, I believe in what he's doing and it's a great solution. It's just, I think it's mailmechanic.com, but, I know he's still getting ready to launch and build it out, but maybe worth you guys having a conversation to see if there's a way that he could team up with you guys.
You know how far back we go with Nick? So he bought our very first outbound mail filtering solution.
Okay.
And he was the first customer for that, a UK2
Oh
group
yeah, yeah, yeah.
in London. I remember going and meeting with him on Brick Lane in East London.
That's awesome.
And he probably doesn't even know that he was the first customer because I was probably like puffing my chest out and saying, we
Yep.
got, thousands of customers. But
Sure.
yeah, for sure. We go way back. And he was at StackPath as well, right?
Hmm.
And he's been all over the industry for years. So, okay, so like when you look ahead to the future at Rocket.net and at the hosting industry in general, what do you see? I mean, something that is constantly intriguing for me is that there are these giants like GoDaddy in the industry, or One-on-One, or Hetzner, or never mind Amazon and Google Cloud. And yet there's this froth of much smaller companies constantly popping up in the industry. And that never seems to die. I'm just I keep waiting for the industry to sort of ossify and just become three giants. Yet you can't seem to kill the entrepreneurial spirit in this industry. Like, why does that happen? And what do you see coming down the pipe in the next, 5 years, let's say, in hosting? Where's the excitement these days?
So, I think for a long time everybody thought it was going to be like Newfold versus GoDaddy, and at the time Endurance, right? And then you've got Wix and a couple other things, but the reality is WordPress is rounding up, powering half the internet. I don't see that going anywhere, especially after companies like Webflow jack prices 26% and you're completely locked in. Um, I think WordPress is super interesting too. I think with Gutenberg, it'd be like ordering a Tesla and going to the factory and watching it be built, right? Like when you see the first door go on, you're like, I don't really get it, but the door opens kind of easy, but I don't see it, right? But if you order a Tesla and then you wait until it's done and you pick it up, you absolutely love it. And I think what a lot of people may not see is they're actually watching the Wix killer and Webflow killer be created right in front of their eyes. But it's
Huh.
very hard to digest and understand that because you're seeing the bugs, you're seeing the pain points, you're seeing, you know, all of that stuff, um, along the way before it's a finished, polished product. So me personally, I don't see WordPress going anywhere anytime soon. I think it's going to continue to be a de facto standard for web development and agencies because of the low overhead. I also think there's a relatively low overhead to get into the hosting industry, which is why you'll continue to see some of the smaller companies pop up. I'm starting to see some people out there like whether it's Elementor or Buddy Boss trying to launch hosting products. I always try to advise them unbiasedly, like don't do it. And the reason is hosting is not easy.
Yeah.
So let work with a partner that specializes in it, right? Like if you build a page builder, what makes you think you can run a hosting platform, right? And I love Elementor. We do joint events with them. Miriam over there is great. CEO, like they're all really good people. And I try to tell them like, hey, like we've solved this problem. Like just resell our product or, whatever it might be, add a bunch of options of hosting companies, whatever. But I think you're starting to see some of the other angle, right? Like software developers that have plugins at scale trying to get into the hosting space to increase their ARPU. But the reality is it's a very hard industry, it's very difficult. So, I think we'll see some more of that. And, I think ultimately we're already kind of seeing the evolution of content delivery where, you can't really find a hosting product today that doesn't mention CDN anymore, right? So there is the days of pointing to a single server are kind of gone, and we're to blame for that as human beings. If Netflix takes one too many seconds to load than you're used to, you're going to Hulu. Netflix is down, even though it
Yeah.
just needed like one more second. So that's the same thing with content delivery. Like if you go to natashaskitchen.com, it's immediately loading up, right? If it took 3 to 4 seconds, you're like, oh, her site's down, I'm going somewhere else. So, human beings are very impatient and, iPhones and all these devices that we have made us that way. So, I think that's kind of like what we were able to break into the market with that edge first approach. Like our customers don't have to know anything about CDN or WAF. It just works and it always works. And it's always on. And we've spent years perfecting our integration with Cloudflare to do that. And it's not so much
Right.
Cloudflare, but it's the edge. Like we have Fastly and Edgio as well delivering, we can deliver them in a multi CDN approach. Like we're not vendor locked to anything Cloudflare does. We don't use workers for anything. It's pure CDN. So which came from years of running a CDN. So I think we'll continue to see that content evolution, and like we're focused on now figuring out how to help get WooCommerce on the map against Shopify. Like how do we help solve some of these scaling issues? Having a guy like Dave Costin on board allows us to do some really creative stuff that may not be traditionally seen in the WordPress developer's eye that's been contributing to core for 10 years. You've got a guy that's built cloud, helped build a lot of Cloudflare and cPanel and all these systems at scale. Throw him into the core code base and let's see what we can do. Right. So we're
Wow.
working on some really cool stuff there. And I've been asked in some of my tweets, do we plan on giving back any of the technology? Absolutely. We're going to be open sourcing as much as possible. We're part of Five for the Future at Rocket, which, we have 5% of our employees contributing to WordPress core. Our competitors doing 50 million a year in revenue don't contribute at all. Right. So, we heavily believe in giving back to the community. And that's a large reason why we sponsor WordCamps. Like, yes, we need to grow. Yes, that's a part of business, but I love buying lunch for every, contributor that's at WordCamp because we appreciate them.
Huh. So that's really interesting. So like you mentioned Rocket.net has gotten to 5 million ARR in 3.5 years, which is amazing. Like, wow. Uh, and you've also mentioned that, you don't have targets. You don't, you're not looking to grow at a particular rate, but getting to 5 million ARR in 3.5 years in this bloodbath industry that's like extremely tough, as you acknowledge, that's quite an accomplishment. Where do you think you might be 5 years from now?
Sure. So, I mean, I should probably, add an asterisk to the, no targets. We definitely have financial models and growth
Sure.
like
Sure, sure, sure.
trajectories, but when I say that, it's more along the lines of I'm not breathing down Chad's neck saying, "Where's the sales at? Where's the sales at?
Right. Right.
Go upsell, right?" And we're starting to see
Right.
that.
Right. Right.
WP Engine, we win a lot of deals where people are spending 10 grand a month. That just doesn't make any sense at all. But it's upsell, upsell, upsell. And, for
Right.
us, I think we're on track to come close, if not doubling the business this year. We have a lot of
Wow.
initiatives at play. We have some massive reseller engagements. We'll actually be announcing some investments of our own into some WordPress companies that we're going to be pairing up with. So, I think 5 years from now, my goal is to effectively have this fungible platform that's focused on WordPress. And if something pivots down the road and maybe it's XYZ instead of WordPress, like we already have this vendor and edge agnostic platform that can literally, if I wanted to deploy anything tomorrow, we could, but I don't want to. I don't want to take the focus off WordPress. I am not here to do that.
Yeah.
I think it would be the biggest mistake ever, and we would fail. So 5 years from now, I hope that we continue to have the same healthy business model that we have today, along with some game changing technology and solutions for the end user to make it easier to use WordPress and scale their businesses online.
So because, one of the elephants in the room these days is this generative AI stuff like GPT, generative images, et cetera. We hear a lot of stories about, and never mind stories. We've all received those reach out emails, cold prospecting emails, that start with, I hope you're doing well, right? I hope this email finds you well, and blah blah blah. And you just know that was auto generated. How is generative AI playing a role? Is it playing a role currently at Rocket.net? How do you see it coming into the picture in the next few years, or is that just not really a core issue?
No, I think, when we launched or we announced not too long ago our Rocket Edge, initiative, it's, at the end of the day, AI is machine learning, right? It's been around forever. Um, I think it's really incredible what you can do to crunch a ton of data. Instead of asking one doctor what the cure for cancer is, you can ask a million doctors and get a response
Right.
in a second. So I
Yeah.
think there's definitely a lot of value, and I'm not completely ignoring the AI craze. For Rocket in particular, machine learning slash AI is going to be extremely important for us as we venture down the multi-edge platform this year. And we will be able to tell, like, hey, Brazil is 100 milliseconds slower than usual on Cloudflare. Let's flip it to Fastly, right?
Right.
And then
Right. Right.
using AI and machine learning to look at all of our access logs to find all the brute force attacks and block them right then and there. So I think there's but all of that stuff, like we did that at StackPath with machine learning. That's
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
any
Yeah.
real WAF has been leveraging AI forever, right? So I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens when people that have copywritten things that end up in chat GPT to provide solutions that like who's going to get paid for that, like Microsoft's making all this
Totally.
money or whatever. So I think that's like a whole can of worms that is yet to really be opened. But also I think at the end of the day, as scary as it might be to think Google and Bing and all these are just AI is going to give us all the answers, and I don't think so. I don't see you know, uh, computer generated content outranking real human generated content, right? Because something about the national park 2 years ago that is now in an answer that's computed today is going to be different than somebody that visited that national park yesterday, right?
Right.
So I think
Right.
at the end of the day that AI is only as smart as we were years ago, right? Not as smart as we are. And I think a lot of people that aren't really into technology might think that it's Skynet and it's over there just learning and becoming so smart and it's going to be smarter than us and take over the world. But the reality is it's literally only as smart as all of us, but it can take all of that knowledge in an unbelievable way to just compute a solution that not one person may be able to do, right?
Right.
Um,
Right. Right.
so I think it's interesting. I think it's definitely, if anything, going to help the web grow because I think it'll help kickstart some. Like
Hmm.
if I'm a plumber, and I'm building a plumbing website through an agency, it might be easy for them to scaffold up a plumbing website using some, generated text and things like that. I think it'll help. I think it's a sidekick and not the main star, if that makes sense, if leveraged properly.
Yeah, that makes sense in the hosting realm that it's a sidekick and not the main star. But one of the big concerns that I'm hearing about is that generative AI is now it's so flooding the web with generated content that the actual AI algorithms are having to be trained on AI generated content, and sort of after a while everything becomes the same color.
Yep.
It all just turns gray. So the large language model companies, one of their big challenges is finding clean data, actual human generated data that's sort of unique and not just rehashed and reprocessed. In the abuse side, the main industry organization that we belong to is the messaging malware mobile anti-abuse working group. It's a mouthful. And last June, a few people within the group started a new initiative that's all about AI threats, and I think that it's likely, maybe more likely than not, that AI is going to become a whole separate track alongside the other three that the organization already covers. Because, for example, just recently, OpenAI announced that they had shut down a number of state actor groups who were using their platform to perform a variety of cyber threat intelligence activities. And I think that must be just scratching the surface of what these new generative AI technologies are going to be used for. But that's kind of outside of the purview of
No, I
hosting.
mean, look, I'm excited to see AI in the medicine world. Honestly, I think that's a no-brainer.
For sure.
I think that's going to be incredibly powerful. I think it's going to be able to tell us things that no single doctor could ever tell us. But again, all 10 of the smartest doctors in the world created this data, right? So,
Right. Yeah.
if I led the AI initiative, I would heavily focus on medicine first, right?
Interesting. Yeah, interesting. So, as a way of closing, I wonder if you could give some advice to aspiring entrepreneurs, whether they're looking at doing a hosting startup or not. Obviously, I think you'd try to turn them away from that. What advice would you give to somebody who is looking to set out on their own and start a company these days in this environment?
Yeah, I mean, I think just do it. Like pull the
Hmm.
trigger, go for it. Responsibly, of course. If you have a family to feed,
Right.
you have to find a way to balance both. And, like me, when I started Rocket, I had a consulting job that I did as well, but I was very upfront that Rocket is my main focus. So, I would say don't hold back, and also dare to be different. Like, yes, you want to be familiar, but vaguely familiar may not be such a bad thing. You don't, if every single business in your sector that you're going to try to break into has the navigation menu for their control panel on the left, put yours on the left, not the right. Keep
Right.
things familiar, but also, dare to be different, push the envelope,
Hmm.
and be innovative. Think about the customer and the solution that and the problem you're solving for that customer and how it will impact their life. And I think when you work it backwards, one of my favorite things that I contributed back to the Founder 500 was, writing a press release first. I think it's one of the most helpful things, whether I'm building a new feature at Rocket or launching Rocket, I start with the press release first. Because when you do that, and I guess this was a very popular thing at Amazon, and I had no idea. It just seemed like a natural thing for me. Like I wrote a press release for GoDaddy Pro, and Jeff King was like, "Where'd you learn how to do that?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "That's a huge Amazon thing." I'm like, "Oh, I had no idea." I'm like, I figured if we're going to go do this, we should start by figuring out how we want the ahas and the wows from the world by starting with a press release, and then we can work it backwards. And yes,
Right.
that list will change quite a bit as you venture down the journey, but it's always a good starting point. It's like kind of also forces you to be disciplined with a mark in the sand. Like, this is what we're building. This is what we're committing to. No scope creep, which sometimes it always happens no matter what. But, I truly, one of my favorite things, and I was just telling a customer of ours this morning who's become a good friend, if you're not truly, if you're not embarrassed by what you're about to release, you've waited too long. And it's so true. Like
If you're not
yeah,
embarrassed about what, yeah,
if you would
that's
have saw the
great.
first version of Rocket, it was built in WHMCS. You couldn't really tell. Like even Matt Pugh from WHMCS was like, "How'd you do that?" We made it look completely different, but it was very, very rough. But it allowed me to validate the market. It took 72 days and 20 something $1,000 for our MVP. And so definitely minimal viable product, and just go for it.
Very interesting. And I guess in the digital space, you can do that. You're not, not like doing a 70K experimental airplane that is going to kill
Right.
people. It's like, go for it, and it's going to be ugly, and under the hood it's a bunch of duct tape and WHM modules or whatever, but it lets you test it out. Sage advice, Ben, and you have the track record and success to prove it. I really look forward to seeing where Rocket.net gets to in the next few years. I'm sure it will look nothing like it does today, 3 years from now, other than perhaps the core values of the organization.
It's absolutely right. Thank you. And you're right about that last statement. Yes, the business will continue to evolve
Mhm.
and mature, but the culture and core values that we have here about customer success will never, ever, ever change.
Awesome. Awesome. It's been such a pleasure talking to you, Ben. And we should catch up again in the future and see how you're doing.
Absolutely. Thanks again for having me.